All right, so our first guest, she is an amazing lady. And I'm very honored that I've known her for some years. I've learned a lot from her. That's Rukka. Rukka from AMAN. She is the first female Secretary General of the Indigenous Peoples Alliance of the archipelago. I'm not so sure if my pronunciation is good, but we usually call it AMAN. It's the world's largest indigenous peoples organization, and it's in Indonesia. And Lukan is a Torajan from highlands of Sulawesi. It's a starfish-shaped island of the with the size of Florida. I'm very lucky that I visited Luca's community last summer. And Luca is known for her fiery oratory and her long-time dedication to the indigenous rights movement. And also her parents hosted a meeting in 1993, and that is often cited as its genesis of indigenous movement in Indonesia. So it's also the start of Aman and the start of a lot of things, a lot of amazing journey of indigenous peoples in the world. So now I will hand over to Ghazali and also Luca.
Thank you so much, Jocelyn, for being a co-host for the fourth episode, being a guest in the what is it, the second episode, and then upgraded to a co-host. And probably you will host it by yourself in episode 8 or 9, maybe, because you're doing quite well. So thank you so much for that. Rukka, selamat malam. Hope you're doing okay. How are you doing so far? Let's start with 2 minutes. How you are doing? Handling the pandemic?
Um, I think this might hurt some if I say that I cherish the pandemic because there are a lot of good things, a lot of good lessons from what is going on now, especially for us, indigenous peoples. And this is the time for us. This is the time really for indigenous peoples to show the world that what we've been fighting for is true, because the pandemic, the virus, giving us all the answers now. We've been trying to convince government. We've been trying to convince all the invaders to come to our invaders on our indigenous territories. They never listen. Now, virus came and they say you have to listen to us. So that's, and before we continue, I would say, Manasu Moraka, that's my greetings, Tabea, Hotu, Selamat Malam, and we say Salam Nusantara because that's how we wrap all the indigenous greetings across archipelagos. Because if I have to mention one by one, we'll have to spend like one whole year. Ghazali knows that.
I know. Thank you so much for also greeting in like the various languages in Indonesia. Jumping right into it, you as the Secretary General, how did you navigate AMAN through the pandemic, and what is, you already alluded a little bit to it, what is the biggest lesson that you have learned as a leader?
I have mentioned earlier that this virus is our friend. We see the virus is actually the force that is sent by the nature, by the Mother Earth and our ancestor spirits to us, to help us. Yeah, this virus, that's the lessons. For me, that's the first lessons. The virus is make sure that you have to stay where you are. Stop being greedy. This is really a punishment for greedy private companies. So that's the first lessons I really got. And how do we know that? And I think that's because from the beginning, we already, as organizations, we already have the preparations. We already have emergency response protocols in place since 2018, 2 years back. We already have that protocol. We already set up an emergency response team. We already set up a special account for emergency response, so we don't have to all the time digging everywhere or begging from everybody. And especially now in the time of this virus, it's difficult to very rely on donors to give us money because they're also struggling. So we have that, and then from the beginning, we are ahead of even our government. Actually, before the government, our government, well, even until today, they are still in denial. But at the very beginning, they really refused to say that this is the crisis, this is the pandemic, and we have to do this. They never do that. But we already say, indigenous peoples, we cannot rely on others. We cannot rely on our government. We can only rely on ourselves. We can only rely on our culture and solidarity. That's our strength. So we immediately announced that we are in crisis. We have to stop traveling, and we actually canceled our big meeting, and everybody have to stay at home. We do lockdown, we call it indigenous lockdown, and also what we call quarantine with dignity. Quarantine with dignity is what we have to make sure with lockdown is you close the gate to indigenous community. We have to make sure that none of this virus will reach our community. If we are disciplined doing that, and that's also the time for the young people, young healthy people, yeah, healthy. It has to be healthy. Young healthy people to go and make posts, watching posts, monitoring posts around our indigenous territorial boundaries. So that's also the time for us to again start to go and recognize every single inch of our territorial boundaries. So they're doing that, and while we are doing the lockdown, all the activities around inside the community can be very normal. People still go to farm, people still go fishing, people still go to the fishermen still go to the sea, they go to the forest. It is still going on until now because we maintain that lockdown now. And then this is also what I would like to highlight, that through this pandemic, all the things that we believe in is happening. We believe in solidarity. We believe in women. We believe in young people. They are the ones who leading this whole thing. The women, they form the groups, they make masks. The elders, the shamans, they make a traditional medicine. They give it around in the community. Everybody gets the vitamins, indigenous vitamins. And the young people, when we say women and young people, when we say we are going to have food crisis, everybody has to start planting the short-term crops. They did it immediately. And now some of our community have started to harvest because they started early in March. So now they're harvesting. So that's what is going on now in Indonesia. Indigenous communities, we are doing pretty well because we are prepared. We were prepared in the beginning.
Rukka, if you can, in terms of like, I think that it will be very interesting to indigenous peoples representatives that also like our umbrella organizations. If you could describe, if you can, like the process of coordinating or communicating what you just now said, like it sounds like you all for empowerment of like women, youth. How do you communicate that? What methods do you use, and what is the message that you bring?
I think that's one of the bless of a communication technology. Yeah, we should, and also globalization. We shouldn't be against everything because we have to make sure that we get the best out of it, and then we have to make sure that all the bad impacts, all the bad aspects of this whole thing will not. We will avoid. We are using online communications, ICT. Yeah. Information and communication technology we're using. Now, the only thing I regret now is I'm so tired of sitting in Zoom meetings. And this is also shows the dynamics that we are indigenous peoples. We have the capacity to adapt. Yeah, can you imagine? Just last week, for the first time in the history, Apai Janggut, the elder from Sungai Uti in West Kalimantan, speaking to me on Zoom. So that's how what we call communication for empowerment of indigenous peoples, and especially our women and young people. So we are communicating, we are navigating, we are coordinating our works all through WhatsApp group. Facebook we don't do much, but we do WhatsApp group a lot, and also do this Google Meet. So we do all these different platform of communications. Of course, we do have challenges, big challenge, because that's the digital divide. Things comes in where even if we have connections, we don't have adequate bandwidth, so we cannot. They can only listen, but they cannot show their video, because if once they turn on the video, then it will go off. There's also places where we do have connections, but indigenous peoples, they don't have access to energy. Yeah, they are off grid. That's why even if they have tools and we can provide tools, they simply cannot, because they are off grid. So these are the challenges that we are facing. It's a big challenge. It's so hard, but because we are working together across Indonesia, 21 our regional chapters at provincial level, and 114 local chapters. But I think the biggest challenge also is in your homeland, Ghazali, in the small islands, because and this is really shows the disparity of this country, because the small islands are always considered second class of territory. They don't have enough infrastructures. It's so difficult to communicate with them. Sometimes we feel like we want to send message through the wind, if it's possible. Yeah, that's the thing. So indigenous peoples, I believe we do have the capacity to adapt quickly, very quickly. In the beginning, we all like struggling. How do we do this? How do we do that? But now we have like hundreds of people already can be a host of our Zoom meetings. So we spread around. They have their own meetings. So our principles is it is not social distancing. It is physical distancing. But because we need that social closeness, and that's our capital. The main capital of indigenous peoples is the social bond, solidarity among us. So that's how we adapt and survive so far. Thank goodness.
Rukka, let me also like talk a little bit or set you up for something that you really would love to talk about. And I know that you are a very strong supporter of indigenous people's right in decision making. You talked about resiliency of indigenous people's adaptation. How does, for people that do not know, indigenous people's right to participate in decision making, how big of a role does that play in resiliency in your mind?
It is very much. I think if we talk about a different level, yeah. When we talk about, because indigenous peoples, we are now under the colonizations of modern state, and we always say nothing about us without us. Every single decision made that will impact our life, we have the right to be there to make the decision together. We have to be at the table. In Indonesia, it is also one of the examples that for more than 10 years now, we still unable to get our Indigenous Rights Act adopted. Why? Because we are not there. And also why all of these bad policies and bad laws exist, just because when they are made, our voice and our representatives is not there. So that's why it is very important for us, for indigenous peoples, to strengthen ourselves and find a way to navigate ourselves and find the mechanisms. How do we navigate and get into that decision-making processes? We cannot be just become like spectators anymore. We have to be there, because we are talking about our life. It has to be our decision. So that's at when we're talking about the state, yeah, with the state public policy. When it comes to the indigenous peoples, again at two levels. When it comes to indigenous people who still holding on the traditions, who still have control over our ancestral territories, and we still manage our territory, we live every day from our territory, from our resources. Those are the ones who prove the resiliency. They are the one, because in the early beginning in March, we say we are going to have food crisis. So each of the community, we need to identify our food stock, how much we gonna last. Well, back then we kind of like underestimate actually the virus. We say we have to make sure for the next 3 to 6 months we have to have food. Indigenous peoples that I mentioned earlier, who still exercise their self-governance, the collective decision-making processes where they involve like women, young people, all elements of the community, and they have control over the land. They are the ones who even have the food for like years. Yeah, but indigenous peoples who have been affected. Sorry, my dog is barking. But indigenous peoples who have been impacted by the bad decisions made by our politicians, country's politicians, whose land have been taken away, whose land have been transformed into oil palm, who's now become the labor for big companies. They are the one who don't have anything. So it is very clear this has something to do, because we don't have access to decision-making as indigenous peoples, to decision-making process in the public policies making, and therefore, and also they don't consider our voice. There is no like free, prior, informed consent in the Indonesian policy and laws. And at the community level, where community are united and still have strong governance, and decision-making process still going on, culture we still follow our ancestor way. They are the one who they even offer food to others. So we've been doing all of that, yeah, sending food to cities, because it's very clear now, Ghazali and Jocelyn, that indigenous peoples, we are the one who feed the world, not Monsanto, not governments, not private sectors. We are indigenous peoples and farmers and peasant people, farmers. We are the one who give food to people, because we also have one big group in around Jakarta, around the capital, because there are so many, like millions, 100,000s of member of union workers has been laid off. So the farmers who are facing operations from the state company, they were the one who's sending 100 tons, has been sending 100 tons of rice to Jakarta and feed the laborers that have been jobless. It's not the company, it's not the government who give them food, but it is the farmers around Java who give them food. So I think that's, for me, that's one of the big message from the pandemic, that I truly believe we are the one, actually the actor of development. We are the one who giving the food to the world, not Monsanto, to be honest.
Thank you so much, Rukka. I think many indigenous people agree with you that now is the time for indigenous people to really assert their right to participate, to really be in those negotiations at the table, be in those discussions. What are your plans? I know that Indonesia is a very delicate situation in terms of implementing indigenous rights. What are your plans on implementing indigenous rights domestically in Indonesian context? And what role does diplomacy play in that?
Yeah, thank you. Diplomacy is very important because diplomacy is a life skill. Yeah, the skill that actually everybody has the talent for that. But first, it has to be guided. Yeah, it has to be guided, and then these people who have the diplomacy skill will have to know where they are from, what kind of aspiration they have to bring in. So that's in AMAN, we work more at local level, provincial and district levels. Why it is one of our approach? Because the farther we are from our ancestral land, the weaker we are. Weaker in terms of because we are small. So in the places where we are more like, it's not dominant, but it's more of we are politically can be dominant at local level. That's the place where we say, oh, this is where we can be in control. We can be on the right. We can influence the decision making process. So through that, we have that kind of like scanning of the situations of local level Indonesia. So we started actually in 2007 that these are the place where we can educate or we can develop our politicians. So we do have politicians, indigenous politicians, who we deliberately send to the local parliaments and also the national parliament, but with the very, very clear assignment and with the very clear mechanisms. Because we know when people goes to politics without a monitoring mechanisms by organization and by their people who they represent, they can lose into the cracks. So that's a very strategic now in Indonesia when we work at local level, because at national level, I can say we don't have control. And again, all these crazy political parties, they are, especially now Indonesia, I'm sure you know that all the state captures theory that we learn in political science is happening in Indonesia. And why I say state capture, because now in Indonesia, you cannot see the difference in terms of their positions and their aspirations between the administration's government and the parliament and the private sectors. They all have same voice. So this is what state capture is. So therefore, we need to get more of our people, our leaders, to learn how to do diplomacy, and we need to also provide them with platform, how they have to work. And also very important that they are just human being. We need to monitor them 24 hours. In my experience, every time I was like, knock knock, how are you, and they say, yeah, I'm doing fine. You doing well? I say, yeah. You've been naughty? No, thank goodness. Yeah. So that's kind of things that we need to do with them. But also don't let them alone. Yeah, we provide supports to them. Yeah, so we have like experts who can do the right things, and sometimes like in the middle of the night, I have to write talking points for them. That's totally fine, because that's what the constituency for. That's what the organization is for. We need to support because they are navigating in the very dark, gray world, and then we are the one who have to keep on providing them the light, the torch from behind. So that's my experience and my opinion on this, Ghazali. It's very, very important.
Thank you so much. And I think you touch upon a very serious element of diplomacy that a lot of people neglect, because a lot of people think it is all about position papers and big statements, but it's also very much about providing fingertip value textual language. Doesn't matter what time it is, and it is very important that we as Indigenous peoples keep doing that, providing that information that the people that we support need. So thank you so much for highlighting that. Rukka, we're nearly ending, coming towards the end of our segment. Is there anything that we did not touch upon that you really want to talk about or want people to think about?
I think, and this is especially to our indigenous diplomats to take on from now, because now indigenous people, this is our moment. Yeah, this is our moment. This virus is our friend. It shows us the way where we have to go. It shows us it gives us the evidence how to argue. Yeah, and how to argue, how to convince our opponent, how to convince them. So I think we have to already think of not just stuck with the pandemic, but we already think of what's beyond this. So my message to our diplomats, including Ghazali and Jocelyn and whoever here, probably watching on Facebook and kind of like giggling, but to all of our indigenous diplomats, if we see ourselves now, yeah, the next future, first, the current economic setting is no longer feasible. It is out of questions. What we need to have in the future, then we have to start now, is if we see economy, of course, we still have to be connected. That's why I say we cannot go against everything about globalizations, but I see our future economy, the new economy, should be economy that looks like a mosaic, but made of thousands, 100,000s, millions of small local economies. Because the small local economy system, they are based on reciprocity, solidarity, indigenous systems, traditions. What we need to have for indigenous peoples is we need to bridge. Yeah, we need to have mechanism to bridge us with others, allowing us to continue to feed them. So that should be the things that we all, all the indigenous diplomacy out there have to be already thinking. So when you talk with government or private company, tell them we don't want you, we don't need you, because we can help ourselves. So that's I think that's from me, Ghazali. So please keep that in mind whenever you go.
Thank you so much, Rukka, and hopefully, because we're not near the end of the webinar series yet, we can come back with you, because I'd love to unpack a lot more about your thoughts and your ideas. You're definitely leading one of the biggest Indigenous people's organizations in the world. So I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned that we can be shared with the other Indigenous peoples. And also, like, you are a role model as a Indigenous woman. So I think, yeah, there's definitely a lot more that we can say, of course, in 15 to 20 minutes. Thank you so much, Rukka. Terima kasih banyak.
And Tuhi. Terima kasih banyak. Excuse me, I need to turn off my video so I get better connection. We are in the third world, sorry.